Hello and welcome to the show. I am elated today with our guest that we have for you. Of course, you know I know the best people out there, and so my goal is to be the bridge to give you access, to give them access to you, and you access to them. So today we have with us Eugenie George, and she is a rock star when it comes to helping people heal their money story as well as their financial trauma. And so I want to just formally say, welcome to the show, Eugenie.
Well, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
I'm so elated that you have the time and that you took the time out to be here and to talk with us today about what it looks like to truly go through our baggage of what it means to be a owner of our wealth and to claim power over our wealth, even though many folks may not have had access to wealth, say for generations.
Yeah.
And so can you tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself? Because I think you can do it way better than I can.
Yeah, I am a certified financial educator. I used to go into corporations and talk to people about money. And it was always a part of like a package. So I would be the person that everyone did not want to see. So you would see like, I worked with the whole team, and the team they were giving massages and they were doing meditation. And then I was the one that hit people with the money. But I will say from working with companies, people get emotional when it comes to money. So that was kind of like my journey for the past 2 years. While I was like getting that data, I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book about money. And so the first book the title that I was going to call it was Not Your Average White Guy's Money Book. And I was like, okay, we're going to make this funny. Everyone's going to like it. But then as I was doing all these workshops, people said, you should really talk about some more serious stuff, because I'm crying in this session and I didn't think I'd be crying in a money session, So what I thought would be, 6 months to write a book turned out to be 2 years. And I've interviewed 40 women of color, and I pretty much went on a journey with them, with my own personal story and then with theirs. And basically what I did was try to find out how policies have been put in place to disbar women of color, and how does that affect them consciously or unconsciously right now. So, yeah.
Nice. And when you mention women of color, you're not exactly just focusing on African-American women, right?
No. So I specifically said my criteria was women that identified as Black, as Latinx, or Latina, depending on how you view that verbiage, and Native American and Asian American. So basically what I did was I took the laws right after slavery, and from after slavery, I just learned about different laws based off of each culture. And I interviewed the women, and I just try to put the two together.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And when you started on this journey of interviewing these 40 plus women, just asking them how their life is impacted as a result, whether they knew it or not, as a result of these laws, because I'm sure the average person walking around cannot tell you what those laws were, post-slavery, each one that prevented them from doing something, but
Right.
Yet it to a degree. And so when you started the project, did you find anything different than what you expected, say towards the end? Was there a disconnect with your assumption or hypothesis?
I would say that my hypothesis was correct, which was nice. I also would say that, I actually had the unique opportunity to be somewhat of a novice in finances, right? Because, 3 years is not a long time to be in finance. But I was a teacher, so I had learned how to become a better interviewer or learned how to understand people's trauma better as a teacher. So I would say those are the two pieces that gave me the ability to actually write something like this. I think there's just not enough information around women of color in general, and money and spending habits, and trauma. So I think me being able to write a book that is really simple so people can read it and not feel like, oh, this is too wordy, this is too much, but can get the gist of how discrimination works with women of color and how it could potentially affect them as well. So that was my goal, is like, how can I make the trauma as bite-sized as possible? And then how can I make it more actionable for the women that just understood or learned about this?
Completely. I understand that a lot. And so if you had to say there was a difference between any of the races, would you say there was one who was dealing with this better than the other, or another race that was, say, lagging in progress, if you had to pick out the outliers?
Well, I think what I would say is, W.E.B. Du Bois said that we are, one in two-ness. I believe that's who said that. Yeah, we're one in two-ness. And so I think what's I wanted to bring to the table is that with women of color, we're one in three-ness. So we have to identify with our culture. We have to identify with our race or our gender. And then we also have to identify with living in America. So because of that, there's a lot of intersectionalities between different stories. Unfortunately, most stories aren't told that way. So I wanted to make sure that everyone had kind of like an overview. So a great example is Asian American women, like women that grew up in second, third generation. What most people see and hear are the stereotypes, which is, tiger moms, they're the ones that are really good with money. They're more family oriented than other cultures, particularly Black. But then you realize, like, most of that propaganda just started in the 60s. And that propaganda typically was to show that Asian Americans are the model minority, and they're posing it against Black women or like Black folks. So once you understand that, like, you can't really compare the two, because you realize how violent the rhetoric has been against Asian women and Black women. I grew up in California, so I celebrated like Chinese New Year. I was around so many Asian people. So I was like, well, this can't be the case. Like, what? This doesn't make sense. I feel like some of my like Chinese American friends are better dancers than some of my Black friends are. So I'm like, wait, like, this is not real. So I found out is that, we like to do the Black Women's Equal Payday. We like to talk about women's equal payday. And what we find out is that Asian American women they have the highest payday, which means their payday is in February, which means they make like 83 cents per every dollar a white male makes.
Wait, pause. So for the Equal Payday days,
yes,
it actually corresponds with how much the ethnicity makes to the dollar.
Yes.
So it's not just random like calendar days?
No.
What?
So it's actually based off of how much $1 a white male makes. So that's why it can be alarming, because when you see all the paydays, it depends on the month. So if you're Asian American, it's February. If it's all women, that's like including white women, it's March. If you're looking at Black women, it's August. If you're looking at Native American, I believe it's October. And then if you're looking at Latinx or Latino women, Equal Pay Days in November. But like the issue with the Asian American, you really have to break it down, because we're talking about Asian Americans like as one monolithic group, just like Black folks. Like half
Mhm.
my friends are Jamaican and the other half are like Haitian, and I'm the only one that's like from, my family's from the South. So it's like we're everything, you know what I mean? So you can't just say like all Black women, all this. So we just broke that down and realized that based off of the ethnicity, some ethnicities were holding, making more money, which was making 16 ethnic groups look like they all are making money. So if you break it down by race, they have a very different story, right? And so that's kind of like, that was like a big aha moment for me when I was doing the research, recognizing that yes, this data is relevant and it's a shock value, but it doesn't really tackle the real issues at hand. It's just one part of someone's money story.
Absolutely. And then you also have the money stories that go in with the home you were brought up in, right? Not just the color of your skin. It's what did your parents have to deal with that you saw from the lens of, say, your 5-year-old or 10-year-old self, and created an interpretation of that. And so I always bring up a story about, say, when I was with my mom, and we didn't grow up the most wealthiest. We were on the lower part of middle class, which pretty much means you're too rich to say you're poor, but you're too poor to get anything rich,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're just you're just trying to figure it out all the time. That's the way it felt. And so my mom, there were times when we didn't have enough money to even, say, pay the bills, right? It was disconnection time. And I would literally tell her, hey, can't you just go to the bank and put that card in and get our money? Like, what are you doing? And she would always tell me, did you put money in there? Because there's no money in there. And I kept on saying, just go put your card and get the money. Like, just think about it and it will happen, right? And at the time, that was me saying that everything is in abundance. But I think having an abundance mindset and really leaning into that kind of lifestyle is a luxury, because when you're living paycheck to paycheck, or you have the thought that you're living paycheck to paycheck, even though you might be making 6 figures, it's a very scarce existence to be in. So what is your recommendation for people who are rather successful? If someone's listening to this, hey, you have probably a computer or a phone that has a smartphone. You're in the wealthiest part of the world, hands down, right? Admittedly so. But for some of us, it doesn't feel that way. So how can we, what I suppose say is, transform our mind? And what steps do you advocate people, whether they are women, whether they are men, but people just in general who don't come from a background of money or have financial trauma, how do they start healing that and moving forward?
Yes. So there's a whole bunch of stuff which I did write in the book, but the
And
first,
your book title, by the way, before you get started, because folks might be like, what is this book? We still haven't set the book title. So the book is, I love it, Our Money Stories, a 6-week, no BS, holistic guide to
yes,
wealth.
yes. So the big pieces for folks to understand is, one, just acknowledge where you are right now. So it doesn't matter if you have a lot of money or you don't, just acknowledge like, I'm here, I'm breathing, I'm safe, which sounds really, doesn't seem significant, but if you start to feel like you matter or feel like you value your life, you are more likely to start paying attention to the triggers. So then the next piece is to write out your money story. So start, I had a journal, my first, like, I believe, years ago, I couldn't tell you when, but I had a money journal. And I started, anything that bothered me with money, I wrote it out. So if it was like, I wrote out, what was my first money memory? What was my, what are things about money that stressed me out? When I think of money, when I think of money, what are the first like 6 words that come to my brain? So really get into the habit of having a conversation with your money. I used to work at a wine bar, and it was in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the US. And I remember listening to how people spoke about money. I remember the conversations that they were having, and the conversations that they were having were so nonchalant about money that that's what really made me think, well, if they're just having a conversation about money, why am I just not why am I not talking about it? I should just be talking more about it. It should just be a normal everyday occurrence where I'm like looking at money, talking about money. If I spend money, we make 5 to 7 money decisions every day. I'm making all these decisions. I probably should just be talking about them more frequently. So just start to get into the habit of talking about your money. And you can find like your writer's prompts. You can find all types of stuff when it comes to writing out your money story. So that's like the first part, having the conversation. The third part I always try to recommend folks as much as possible is working with a mental health specialist or working with a financial therapist. And some people are like, oh, what's a financial therapist? Well, there are people that specialize, psychologists as well as financial advisors that have certificates for financial therapy. So when you start, you could talk to your therapist about anything, but when you get specific around money, you're more likely to understand that a lot of things that trigger you had to do with money. Angela, you just said it earlier, like your mom said, I can't just go to the bank and get the card, right? So that can create a trigger with you like long term. So even if you have the money, you might unconsciously say like, I can't get this wedding ring because it's out of I don't have the right card. This is for a black card or whatever. So just those types of things are really important to be aware of. And having someone else listen to you talk about it you're more likely to uncover some things. And a lot of things typically end up being ancestral. So that was my big thing. That's what I wrote about in the book, which was my dad drinks Coca-Cola, like is obsessed with Coke. And I was like, why? And I realized like my obsession with Coke, I don't even drink Coke. But if somebody said like, hey, are you a Coke family or a Pepsi? I'd be like, Coke. But I don't even drink sodas. So why was I saying that? That's my dad's pattern. Then we come to find out that like I did more digging with myself and with my dad. But then we find out that my dad started drinking soda as a 20-year-old because he wanted to feel connected to his like extended family, because that was what they did. They always drank Coke. So that was like a one pattern that got passed on to 3 generations. And if you really think about it, like monetarily, my dad buys Coke all the time. So he's spending money on Coke, right? Because that's the thing that makes him feel good. So I think it's really important to think like, what are the patterns that I'm making that is controlling my money story consciously and unconsciously, and how can I get help with that as well?
So, you guys own Coke stock?
No.
Why not?
I do have the stocks that I do have the stocks that I owned when I was a kid. I followed Hershey, B of A, and Atari. So I did get those stocks because I was like, that was my first touch of finance when my 4th grade teacher said, hey, do you have that? So I guess now I'll get Coke too. But yeah.
I think you should be doing that for your dad, like giving it to him for or something, and just like, here you go. Here's like $50, $100 worth of Coke stock. You don't have to just drink it. You can own it.
It's pretty smart. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, honestly. And so for I'm a huge advocate of investing over consumption, and not that there's anything wrong with consumption, but I think if you do consume something, or if it's tied to a beautiful story like that, I mean, you just said it. I mean, for 3 generations, you guys are going to be Coke supporters.
Right.
Own it, right? I mean, it just makes so much sense from my lens. But again, this is why it's so helpful to speak to people, because as you're speaking, you know, there's a reason why we have two ears and one mouth, right? As you're speaking, someone else is listening, and we get to do the processing for each other. Which is why, again, folks, it's really important to get a coach or to get support, because sometimes you may think that you can do it all alone, all by your, you know, bad self. But there are certain things that might be on your face. And even if you're looking in a mirror, you're still not going to see the blemishes and the cracks and all those things that someone who is just right up close to you would actually see. And
Right.
so go for it. So with that said, before we wrap up, one of the things that I think money has, you know, a lot of people, when they go back to their money story, or if you ask them, what are some of the things that we were taught growing up about money? There's one saying that comes up quite often, which is money is the root of all
Evil.
with, yep, all evil, fill in the blank. And it's something that's quite common in terms of a perspective. And so, with that said, if money is the root of all evil, even as you're starting to make money in your life, as investments are growing or as you're becoming wealthier, you're tied to this idea that somewhere deep down inside you're becoming more evil. Or perhaps you might be the person who never thought about truly looking at your wealth or understanding it, because you're thinking you're evil and you kind of don't want to go there. And so, all this to say is that money, the topic of money has a burden, it has a heaviness, you know, or it could not. It could also be super light. And for me, money isn't heavy. It's light. It's almost like a fragrance. Like I walk into it and like my whole countenance changes because I smell something. My senses are peaked on many different levels. But like I said, for some people, this is not the case. And so can you talk to us just a little bit about, I know that you're starting to work in with the theory of how your relationship to money actually impacts your mental health. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the reason why I wrote the book as a whole. But to kind of backtrack it, when I was 18 or in high school, I wrote my senior thesis on racial disparity in healthcare. I just was like, I was like, people are being treated wrongly, and people should know, and they should know. And my high school was predominantly white, so I was like, they need to know. Like, I was just like, they need to know. And so that was like my first touch of understanding how health affects your money long term. So I used to go and volunteer at Children's Hospital in Oakland. I did it all through high school and then all through college as well. And, you know, that's like almost 8 years of being in a hospital, but also recognizing how hospital bills affect people that are disenfranchised at a larger rate. I believe it used to be where the largest thing bill that used to be on people's credit score was their medical bills, right? So I always had that in the back of my mind, like, people aren't being treated fairly. Why is that? I didn't know how to articulate it. You know, fast forward to almost 15, 20 years, even though I look young, I'm like, oh, okay, that was a while ago. But but yeah, so I always would like read just little things about how money affects our health. And so it wasn't until last year that that idea came back to my mind, which is why I talk about mental health in the book. Dr. Nadine Harris Burke, she is the California Surgeon General, and she talks about ACE scores, which is called Adverse Childhood Experience. And basically, anybody can take this test and you can find out where you fit on the scale of 1 through 4. So 1 meaning like you experience trauma, to 4, 4, 5, 6 meaning that you're going to have to pay more attention to long-term health effects. They can trace it back to drinking soda. They can trace the ACE score back to smoking cigarettes, coping strategies. And so, like we said earlier, that Coke idea actually had to do with my dad's ACE score. So when you really think about it holistically and big picture, your body and your mind has everything to do with your money, and what you do with it and what you spend with it. You shouldn't feel shame towards it. You should try to seek awareness. So the ACE study in particular can tell you what's happening long term. But for me, I was like, well, how does this ACE score, how does my trauma affect my money story? So I went back through looking at different parts of my like financial wellness pillars or lens, and I basically was like, okay, well, how does money affect my spirituality pillar? How does the trauma, and I actually was pretty traumatized as a child when it came to money at church, because 80% of Black folks in America have some sort of religion or spirituality, right? I grew up, we had the prosperity gospel. It was like all clefto dollar, all that stuff. And so my thought towards money was, oh God, the only way that God will bless you with money is if you are worthy of something. Not thinking, oh no, that really has nothing to do with God at all. That's just a man or a woman telling me what I need to do, not having to actually do with spirituality as a whole. I'm not bashing any of those folks, but I have to see, well, where did their trauma come from? And how does this affect their lives? So I had to backtrack, and most of my teachings about money and around money came from church. So that was the trauma that I had. So it was like, if you didn't do something good, God wasn't going to bless you with money. So for me, I had to go through a whole spiritual undertaking, and I'm still going through that process right now, which is, I used to do Dave Ramsey. I used to do any type of like church equals prosperity thing, and recognizing that those are two separate things, and that doesn't necessarily should affect the way I'm using my money. I should really think about my budget or investing, and I shouldn't be like, well, God's going to bless me this way, or he's going to take it away from me. The take it away from me thing, that was the thing that hurt me the most. It was like, oh, we got this taken away from us, which means we're not worthy of it. So it's really connected to all aspects of your life. And like we said earlier, working with a mental health specialist or working with a coach or working with someone can help you see how those patterns play a huge role.
Yeah, or getting your book and doing the
Yeah.
6-week journal prompts, right? I mean, you created something because clearly you've done quite a bit of research on this, not only from your own personal life, but you've actually scientifically, as well as all the other ethicallys I can think of, like mathematically, historically, all the leads, like I said, it sounds like you've really done your homework in going through this. And what's really interesting, as you were telling your story about your relationship with spirituality in the church, which I really appreciate you for being so open about that. That was I call church my plug. Like that was my first plug into God. Like that was my outlet, literally, and I came into this world as a Black woman of color, of West Indian descent, and all these other fun little tricks and bells and whistles. And that's one of the bells and the whistles. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until I got really spiritual and into meditation that I remember resenting the fact of like giving 10% away. And sometimes growing up in church, they would say like, don't you steal from God, or don't you, like, it would be like a real big, a very heated moment in the service. Like you could feel the body temperature collectively rising.
And it would be like, I remember going to church service where half of it would be balloon payment. Like half of the sermon would be, let's pray for this balloon payment. Come to the stadium and give your money. So when you have, yes, we're on the same page. It's like, I go to it. I like when I do go to church, or when now we don't really do much any of that at all, really. But when I do, I was really cognizant of what church am I going to? What is their tithes and offerings like how do they actually manage tithes and offering? And 3, what is their debt to ratio? Like I was like, I'm very much so like, are they the people that are being patient and waiting to purchase their building? Like what is their spending method? Because it's still a business, right?
Absolutely. And it's so interesting because it is a business, and they have to keep the lights on. That's how you know it's a business. If you gotta
Yeah.
keep the lights on, you got a business, honey, because the government isn't going to take prayers for payment. So they're just not. But the really interesting part about it was as I became more spiritual, I started appreciating the notion of tithing. And I started appreciating it in the sense of non-attachment. And so if I can give something away just out of the willingness of my heart, whether it's 10%, 20%, or 30%, wherever the numbers fall, because before I definitely had resentment, especially when you got that sheet at the end of the year for your taxes and it'd show you all the money you gave. And then I check my savings account and I'd be like, pause though. This ain't adding up real quick right now. Like, and that's on me, but I wasn't saving as much as I was giving. But then I, of course, started figuring that out. But like I said, in terms of non-attachment, now I have this idea about money, and investing has helped me with it more so because when you invest, your money goes out and it comes back with friends. And it really, you check it one day, it's one amount, and then you check it another day, and it's like a totally different amount, and you did nothing. It literally just like grew, and for me, when I think about spirituality and God, I'm like, look at God, like, look at this. And
Yeah.
so I think about non-attachment. Seriously, you'd be like, what? I don't even understand how this happened. Like, how is there an extra digit? You know what? I'm not, thank you, Lord, and just receive it. So when I think about, again, tithes, and I think about non-attachment and the trust it takes to give money away and to put money into something, whether it's an investment or paying off debt, whatever that is, and to have the knowingness in your soul or down to your fiber that you are more than enough to get this back and more. I think it's just such a litmus test to spiritual as well as physical growth and maturity. And so even monitoring those conversations that you have when you're a kid all the way up until your adulthood, check in with those conversations. Check in like, hey, I used to feel this way about even like tithes. I used to feel this one way about it. And now it's so different. And I can definitely it took time. It took about like a good 20, 30 years. I've been around tithes a very long time. And it's just beautiful once you actually take a bird's eye view to your finances.
Yeah. And you can use that for, we can leave with an investment conversation, right? And so I paid off all my undergraduate student loans. It was like, woo, really proud of that. But I remember going back to, okay, I'm going to invest heavily now. So right now, like basically most of my book sales and different things are going to some form of investment. So it's like, that's just, everything's automated for that, right? Which is great, right? Yeah. But the best thing is, I always, what we can leave with is, it's really important to find your financial BFFs. Like I talk about this in the book, but you have to find the people that have the language, and it has to be more than one, and find who is your financial BFFs. So whenever you're stressed out, what do you do? So now I have graduate student loans, started freaking out, but then I called my first financial BFF, who's a financial planner, and she's like, let's just sit down, talk about it. We sat down, talk about it. Now I know how my savings is for the next year. I go, okay, well, I need to actually talk to someone who knows how to deal with stocks and understanding how they correlate with your student loans. So I have an appointment with the student loan buddies. So it's like, and I know 3 of them, and they were, I don't know, we were both at that conference. They were there. Yeah. So it's like, I know.
I actually know a colleague of mine who works with them too. So yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, I have a meeting with them. Then I was like, okay, well, now I'm getting these royalties. What is that going to look like? So my accountant is Erica Booth, right? So that's someone who knows my money story. Because I talk to people about exactly what's happening. What are my fears? I tell them everything because I'm like, you're dealing with my money. So this is important to me. And I mean, now I have y'all, Terry, the whole crew, when it comes to me really getting interested in stocks, which I'm excited about because that's like a childhood dream still deferred. So I'm excited about that. So I think, you know, whoever's listening is to really think about, like, do I have a business? Who do I need to talk to? I want to invest in stocks. Who do I need to talk to? Do I have student loans? Who do I need to talk to? And really just start Googling and researching and try to figure out how you can find people that are actually there to help you. And if they don't help you, you kick them to the curb and find another BFF.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the show today. How can people keep tabs on you? So, of course, they're going to all run out and go get your book. It's on Amazon. Literally, Our Money Stories. You type it in, it's one of the first things that come up. And you're going to notice the title because it literally says a no BS holistic financial wellness plan. And there's like all these beautiful women on the cover, and it is applicable to men as well. So if you happen to be, you know, have an extra Y chromosome, you're cool too. It's fine. But how can people also keep tabs on you? So I did do a little bit of research, and you did I see right that you have a CNBC column in the works or in the making?
I'm doing a whole bunch of stuff. So yeah, there's about to be a bunch of little, waiting for contracts, but there's about to be some, you'll start seeing me in the news. You'll see me in like the Financial Diet. I'm gonna write a couple articles with them, Business Insider. You're probably gonna see me quite
everywhere.
Great. Yeah. Which we talk about all this stuff, which is pretty cool. And then I rant a lot on Twitter. Like you can just find my name at _Eugenie George. And that's for Instagram and Twitter. But I'm a huge ranter on Twitter because I think the one thing that I like about Twitter right now is that I can literally just do these little bite-sized facts, you know, and people can get it. So I think we're at the stage in the world where people are trying to listen and learn about their own money stories. So I try to tweet as much as possible. And Instagram, I was doing a couple of money dates, and I think I'm going to go back to doing money dates. Like, how do you have one? What does it look like? Again.
Very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show again. Y'all make sure to support Eugenie. She is an amazing, amazing person, a thought leader. And I'm already putting my investment talk down and saying that I know within just a few short months or a few short years, you are going to blow the heck up. And people are going to be like, yo, I remember seeing her on the Happy Investor Method show. I was on her before. And so y'all get on it, right?
Love it.
Bye.
All right.